So we're going to go into the last panel discussion for this conference, and that's, of course, on business tourism. So help me please warmly welcome to stage the moderator for this, Lenny Kunga, who is obviously from Visa. A round of applause, please.
You said, you know we're coming to the end by the way people are clapping, and I can feel it. Afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thanks for the invitation to be here. My name is Lenny Kunga. I'm the Senior Director for Visa, Sub-Saharan Africa, and Visa is the Global Payments Network. I'm going to invite Otto, the CEO of ASATA, as part of my panel, and Glenton, the CEO of SAACI, as my other panel member. Thanks, gentlemen, and welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think, let me just explain a bit in terms of like what Visa does and why we think Visa is important, especially for the travel industry. So like I said, Visa is the world's largest payments network. We facilitate how you pay and how you get paid. Visa has got about, I think a lot of you, if you got Visa cards in your pockets, either for your consumer cards, your personal cards, or for business travel, which will be your corporate or business cards. We have over 4.5 billion cards in people's pockets globally. We issue physical plastic, that's the card in your pocket, and that could be for your own personal, and for most of you who are business people, that will be a corporate card or a business card, right? And in terms of where that card can pay or participate, we have got over 130 million merchant locations globally. So what that means is it gives you, as a traveler or a business traveler, the comfort that in most destinations when I go, I don't have to carry cash. I can pay with my card and it will be accepted. And the payment method obviously could be physically, like at point of sale, or online. And I think for you, most travelers, when you do your bookings, mostly it's using your card and then paying online. And the good thing about the corporate card, I'll focus on the corporate card more, and the business card is the value it comes with it in terms of facilitating travel, making payments, and then, or even when you want to be paid, you know what I'm saying? And quite often, because people travel a lot, you find that it can happen that you're in a different country and you lost your card, and what do I do? You know what I'm saying? And your own bank might not be in that country. But because we are Visa and it's a global network, you could go to a bank that issues a Visa card in the destination that you are, and they definitely will communicate with your bank to issue you a replacement so that you can continue with your stay there and be safe. However, from a commercial perspective, which I encourage most business to have, like a commercial card or a business card, we have got a facility where, for your business, the bank issues you a business commercial card. They can issue a virtual card as well, where if I get here in Sun City and I lose my card, I could phone my office and our office manager will issue a virtual credential. And on my mobile app, I'll have my Visa card that I lost, and I can continue transacting. As you know, payments now is so digitized that even on your mobile app, you still can transact without necessarily using a Visa card. So I've looked at travel, especially business travel, post the pandemic. I think we're almost at the level that we were, like 2019. Obviously, for leisure, that's the bulk of the travel. But again, for business travel, it's also going up. And this is both cross-border and regionally. And we're seeing a lot of travel, both for leisure and business, especially from our surrounding areas, your countries like Namibia, Botswana, Mozambique, and stuff like that. But again, also from international, you know, like your UK, Ireland, US. So these are the corridors that we are seeing. And I think as Visa, we are here to support the travel industry. And I'll be keen to hear your insights, if there's any time for questions, in terms of how we can improve the way you do business and facilitate, you know, corporate travel. So with this, let me get Otto to just give a brief of what he does and what they do, and then after that, Glenton.
Sure, thanks, thanks Lenny. So I think it might interest the audience today because I think we often don't fully understand in terms of the travel agency and the travel management space exactly what the role is and the value that we make as a contribution towards the broader tourism sector. So for those that are not familiar with terminology like TMC, it's an abbreviation for travel management companies. At ASATA, we represent South African travel agents and travel management companies. And these businesses are there specifically to manage the business travel components for corporates as well as business people, as individuals. The role of a TMC is varied, but can be categorized as travel planning and booking, expense management on behalf of the corporate customer. A very strong and important component is duty of care and risk management. And then last but not least, policy compliance and control. Within a corporate space, there are a lot of policy requirements and a need for compliance to take place both within the booking process as well as within the travel space. In terms of value, the Minister highlighted in her speech in July that the domestic tourism spend increased to 123.8 billion rand last year versus foreign direct spend of 95.1 billion. Now, that might be the first surprise. We focus so strongly on inbound tourism that we sometimes forget that, in fact, domestic tourism, which incorporates business, meetings, incentives, and the likes, is actually a greater contributor than inbound. And whilst it took the corporate travel sector longer to recover post-COVID, I think we are finally at a place where we could say that we are back at 2019 levels. So I think that that is an encouraging position. We have done some assessments and we think that corporate travel spend that is actually going through the travel management company and the travel agency sector is somewhere in the value of 70 billion rand. And in fact, what we do know is that airline sales through South African travel agents and travel management companies for 2023, and these are bookings outside of direct and website bookings, reached 38 billion rand in 2023. So all in all, we think that 80% of these airline sales are also actually servicing the corporate and business traveler, as most of that focus has shifted to those TMCs. From a global perspective, the 2024 Business Travel Index predicts that spending in the corporate travel space globally will reach $1.48 trillion by the end of this year. And that is a new record, the previous one being 2019 at $1.43 trillion. The Middle East and Africa is valued at $30 billion for 2024, making up at this point only 2% of the global total. So I just thought it would be important to frame that because within that context and keep in mind that it's not just domestic but outbound travel that happens from a business perspective as well. The concept of payment and the need to have effective solutions that meet the needs of both the corporate customers as well as the travel management companies that facilitate that business is absolutely critical to its success. And the data that comes through modern electronic digital forms of payment allows a much stronger control mechanism and the ability to provide data and reporting back to those corporate customers as they look to review, assess, and try to manage the expenses around corporate travel.
No, thanks, Otto. Quite a good overview and very important, you're right. I mean, because when you travel, even for business, when you pay, you want to have an ERP that says, I can tie this transaction that I did to this particular spend and for your management and the expense, accounting and expense management. So that's what like the Visa corporate card actually comes with and helps with that. Thanks for that overview. And Glenton, to you?
Lenny, I think to get the crowd excited, what you should have told them as they leave, they're going to get their Visa loaded cards when they leave here now. So I think they'll get more excited about that. So he was leaving that for last. But thanks to yourself and thanks to Otto and the way that I explained this, and some of you have been sharing this over the last couple of days, my dad who's 78 doesn't believe that I actually have got a day job. So I'm always trying to find a way of how to explain what we do within the meetings and event space. And as Otto has explained what a TMC is, I always say that if you're in the meetings and event space, we're not a travel agent. We're actually agents of change. Because if you think about how your day has started, you've learned something that you maybe thought you knew, but you know a little bit better. And you've also enhanced your knowledge about parts of the aspect of the industry as well. So when we look at where you place the MICE sector, or the meetings and events sector as I call it, we're not necessarily tourism, but we can drive destinations. And in parts of our country, we've definitely done that in respect of how we go into villages, towns, and small dorpies. I think the opportunity that we need to enhance is how do we, when we talk about 15.6 million people, and you listen to the numbers that Otto has shared, how do you put meetings and events at the forefront of that? Because there are many of us that would think of some destinations in our country as not necessarily destinations you're going to go to for leisure. You know? And I hate using them as an example, but Rwanda is one of those countries where people go to Rwanda not for the gorillas. They go there for the meeting.
Yeah.
And by default, extend your stay and we do the gorillas.
Yeah.
So as South Africa, I think we have an abundance of opportunity to drive destinations that are probably not going to be leisure destinations, but predominantly a meeting and events destination.
Yeah.
You know, and we're in one of those where, if you think of the evolution of Sun City as a product, it came through an eventing space and all the leisure activities that go with that as well. So for ourselves and for those of you that don't know my association, we're the Southern African Association for the Conference Industry, and predominantly what we've done through the pandemic, which was part of that sort of nice to have in another way that I explain what I do on a day job, is if you're working in an audit space, you know, the auditors will always tell you they've got the audit sorted for the next 3 years.
Yeah.
So this is what South Africa has done in the last 2 and a bit years, is that for 2025, a big percentage of destinations in terms of venues are booked up. 2026, we're probably at 35% of venues and events booked up, and we're starting to bid for 2027, 2028. You know, so when you listen to the minister this morning, a very bold statement about a 10-year agreement with Formula One, think of all the supply opportunities in respect of, we talk transformation, we talk about the youth, and I said this to a colleague earlier this morning, whenever we talk about the youth, I always go like, where are they, right? So they're either not in the room, and we speak about them, or they're not on the stage, and yet we speak about them as well. So the meetings and events industry for South Africa is probably, and I know that David Frost is not in the room, but it's probably more important than the leisure side. Because if we're going to do 15.6 million visitors, if we do 400, if you do this, and we were 475, I think, that registered for this event, you do 10 of these is 4,000 people. You know, you do 400 of these across the country, your numbers exponentially increase as well. So I think the value is sometimes underplayed in respect of what we do.
Yeah.
And from that, the knowledge that comes out of a meetings and event space is sometimes not really appreciated. So my final closeout before we go back to the next round of questions, and I call them the astronauts, but the Astronomical Society, or Institute of Astronomical Society, I think it was almost a month ago, had 1,500 delegates down in Cape Town, and there wasn't much media around what they did there, right? But as we were sitting, one of the sessions, they dialed into the International Space Center. So they dialed into the International Space Center. So when we look at our destination from a South Africa's perspective, when we talk technology, I've been trying to get my colleagues, and particularly the event organizers, to do more media around that, because how cool is that to speak to an astronaut from Cape Town? I mean, just sort of like imagine that in that regard. So there's a lot of what happens in our space, and we're to blame for that as well sometimes, because we're so bogged down about making sure that the event runs, and I feel for the AV guys at the back there, I feel for the MC or the timers to get this right, but all the supply side behind that is sometimes missed as well.
No, that's quite great. I mean, and you mentioned Formula One. I think when Glenton was just mentioning Formula One, and I see there's a great excitement about Formula One. So Visa sponsors Red Bull, and
let's hope they do well this week in Singapore.
And if you're in Senton, I think the first week of October or 2nd of
Correct,
October,
yeah.
there's some Red
Formula
Bull
One.
that's going to be happening there,
Yeah.
and Visa is the sponsor for that. But anyway, coming back to tourism, I mean, the importance of tourism in terms of how it contributes hugely to the economy, and even employment. If you think of it, it's your airlines, right? It's your hotels, it's restaurants. And if I look from a corporate perspective, I know there's a time when when I go to Cape Town and you can't find accommodation at Westin when they're running the mining in Durban, right? And I want to push this to you, Glenton, to say, what is it that as the industry, and I think together with government, attract more of these corporate events? I think the mining in Durban is the one most known in South Africa, where a lot of people globally come for that. And then when I look at, say, from an IT perspective, or a security or a risk perspective, there's one famous one in Barcelona in Spain, and that's for payments. And the other one happens in Netherlands. Fortunately, in next year in February, we bring in a risk and security summit in Cape Town, but what is it that we can do with government and corporates to bring in a lot of these corporate events to South Africa and help grow our economy and create employment for a lot of our people, yeah.
Yeah. So I always use the word deliberate, and I do that deliberately because it's a very competitive space. At a global level, for pitching for signature events, it's significant in that regard. So there's two ways you do that. And we in conversation, and I've got colleagues from South African Tourism, particularly the National Convention Bureau, and as an association, we have been pushing to review a national MICE strategy, or meetings and event strategy, because some of us will be at the Delicious Festival in the coming days. Mine is to say that we need to consider South Africa, right? And then figure out if the Delicious Festival or the Two Oceans Marathon is our signature event, because you got the base there.
Yeah.
Right? If you're bringing in a new event, let's say we want to bring the Astronomical Society back next year, or you want to take the TBCSA conference somewhere else, that requires a significant amount of conversation. And I always say to my colleagues, forget about the budget, have the conversation first. Because the person that makes the decision to bring it to Africa must come to South Africa.
Yeah.
And our biggest competitors at the moment is not Rwanda. It is Uganda, Ethiopia, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Nigeria, Cairo, Morocco, Tunisia. Yeah. Right? Those are our competitors. But we've got an opportunity because we've built a good base of cooperation between public and private sector. What we've not doing clearly, and we did this last week in Cape Town, to get some of our big players and operators come together and understand what happens in the calendar. So a good example would be, in this instance, I think there were 3 events happening at the same time, but between September and December, just on a desktop survey, you got 55 meetings, conferences, or events happening, 55, which averages out probably about 2.7 a week, for instance. At a supplier level, if you're looking at calendars for 25, 29, if you don't have the suppliers to match that,
yeah,
there's no use winning that event. So I think as South Africa, what we must be clear about, and I know some destinations don't enjoy me saying this, but we must pitch in areas where we can deliver. So we've got a portfolio evidence of getting that right. And a good global example at the moment now is, I think it was last night or the day before, Glasgow's decided to host the Commonwealth Games. That costs a huge investment and guarantee from government, but private sector must come to the party to deliver that as well. So mine is a simple one, is that we've got the tools and we've got the mechanisms to deliver signature events that we all agree on to. These are the events. I mean, the Durban July would be one of those that are signature, but of a national level, not international level. You could argue that the DSD Delicious is an international event because Jill Scott and you've got Janet Jackson performing there. So is there an opportunity for us then to elevate that, to say that's our signature food and wine event?
Yeah.
There's opportunity there. So
Janet's not coming.
Oh, you're not coming now?
No.
Oh, sorry. Okay.
I
didn't check. I didn't check my my updates there. So my apologies.
Busta Rhymes now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my apologies. Oh, Busta Rhymes. I mean, so there we go. But it's those conversations that I would want us as Destination SA to honestly have, because what we sometimes find, Lenny, is that we get to these forums on a trade floor, and we're bidding against each other. We literally are bidding against each other, and that's not healthy. So as an association, we've been clear that we mustn't cost ourselves out of the market, but we must be very clear how we support one particular. Correct, yeah.
That's great. And I saw that there are airlines here. I saw my friend Carla from South African Airways. I've got a colleague who is flying to Côte d'Ivoire today. She's taking a flight to Dubai,
Yeah.
and from Dubai to Abidjan. And I'm a frequent corporate traveler. The nightmare of traveling within Africa is something that we say, can the travel industry, especially airlines, help and facilitate? Because it becomes costly. It's time consuming to travel out of Africa to come back to Africa to do business in Africa, and vice versa. Even like, the banking partners that we have, when they're flying from Côte d'Ivoire to come to meetings, they need to go to Europe and come here. Coming to you, Otto, the use of technology in the corporate travel, your insights on that?
Sure. Look, I think it's one sector that has been at the forefront of implementing and developing technical solutions and digitizing the sector. And there's a lot of reasons why it's been at the forefront and has always been, I guess, a sector that could drive that agenda, because, as I alluded to earlier, when you're booking in the corporate travel space, there is a very clear travel policy from the booking and the booking process, the travel process, the duty of care. And because it's all formulated in a contractual manner, you can build that into the booking tools, the online booking tools. Because what will happen is the person who's making the booking, and it could be a staff member within the corporate company, can actually facilitate and process that booking themselves within the parameters and the limitations that have been predefined by the travel policy of that company. So we've been at the forefront of that kind of development. What is very exciting at the moment, and I think which is going to be even more interesting, is the fintech space. And it's going to increasingly underpin the processes beyond just the booking, but the payments. And I say this because cross-border payments presents sets of challenges, regulatory requirements, but more importantly, if you think about fraud, and this is why virtual cards have become such a massive success in the travel industry, simply because you can actually formulate a very clear, within a bin number range, certain recipients that can receive payments. It's one-off, and it wouldn't work for anybody else. But I think more importantly, where the fintech space is going to get interesting is where we know that there are multiple suppliers that need to be paid across borders, across local supply chains. And because of the diversity, the concept of cards or having some form of digital payment as a solution, as I alluded to earlier, then also integrates perfectly in terms of the reporting. When we are doing sort of normal standard cross-border payments through bank transfers, a lot of that then has to become manually, uploaded into the data and the reporting mechanisms that are so critical as one of the TMC components. So it is a sector that has been leading, and in fact, we're seeing through a number of major global mergers and acquisitions that are taking place in the TMC space, that the conversation as to what the service and the role of those businesses are is fundamentally changing. And not only in terms of its value proposition, but also the way that it delivers that value. And more we're seeing these travel companies calling themselves travel technology providers.
Oh, that's great. Sorry, how many? 10 minutes?
Yeah.
No, that's good. I was going to say, like, we can carry on until after lunch, This is exciting. No, I got you. So the other thing, you touched on that, on technology. And any challenges that you see with government travel?
Look, and I think I'm not sure if my colleague Pale is still here from National Treasury.
I think he left.
We have a very cordial and a very strong working relationship with National Treasury. And they have been at the forefront of, over the years, trying to implement and provide frameworks for how government procures and also books travel. And yes, over the years, there have been a lot of complexities that have come into the space. And interestingly enough, one of those big challenges has been initially to try and get government departments to introduce lodged cards. government lodge cards
Yeah.
to support the payments through the TMC. And why was it problematic? Because there was a very dated way of doing things, paper invoices
Yeah.
that then had to be approved, and only bank transfers because there was no cards. And then as the impact was late payments, delayed payments, lost invoices, et cetera, et cetera. So that's certainly been an area that has been challenging. We have certainly not overcome all of those obstacles. There has been a much higher level of adoption with government departments in terms of implementing and bringing in lodge cards, but we still have a long, long way to go. And in fact, we're right in the middle of a fundamental shift in the way that government is procuring the services of travel management companies going forward in terms of a new set of recommendations that National Treasury has put out. And there's a much higher autonomy now in terms of government departments choosing how they are going to procure travel. And Treasury is providing, if you will, like a framework for that, but it's a lot less prescriptive than what it used to be. So the challenge now will be for those government departments to cooperate and work closely with their travel management companies in developing what that's going to look like going forward.
Yeah, and I think that's quite interesting because if you look at, before I joined Visa some years back, I used to work for a company and they would give you cash, when you travel. Well, I used to love it then because, instead of going to eat in a restaurant, in a hotel, you'll find somewhere you can eat and then you put the change there. But then, if you're a CFO, you want to have visibility of the spend that's in. So when I look at the corporate cards, now, if I buy coffee there, real time, right, in our expense management system, they can see like, oh, yeah, where Lenny bought, it was a coffee shop, you know what I'm saying? If I were to abuse the card and I buy whiskey, it will obviously show that this was a liquor store. So I think from a control and management perspective, right, in terms of looking at spend, you want that transparency and visibility from a business perspective, And you can put controls as well to say, okay, fine, we're putting a limit, say, on this card for 30,000 rand because Lenny travels just to Cape Town and back. But I mean, if he's going to travel international, we can put, raise the limit. So all these controls come in with a corporate card or a business card, and that's what you want to do as a business. Yeah, coming to you, Glenton. I think we spoke about a lot of things. I want to understand from you what strategies can South Africa put in place, to try and drive private-public sector partnerships and strengthen our position as a, leading destination of choice for most of these businesses. I know I spoke about events like the mining Indaba, but what more could be done? Private partnering.
I think you have to bring communities into that conversation as well. And we've seen some good work, and I'll give them a shout out because they've been a sponsor. Stellenbosch, as an example. I mean, you think Stellenbosch, you think wine. Right? At the moment now, Stellenbosch has been able to build supply chain in terms of local government with some of the top wine farms into the community as well. So just from being an entertainer, communities have been able to provide some of these name tags, right?
Yeah.
And particularly their lanyards have gone globally. I mean, they had all major international shows, so they've been sold outside of the country as well. So that's a sort of a good economic story. Because I think sometimes we also have this sort of thing as South Africans, we want to tell a story that makes us feel good. I'm in the space of what's the financial benefit? Because we all want to make money in the industry going forward. And in saying that, from a space side, and the Durban ICC was a good example in respect of how government came in to fund a venue that has become an iconic venue, and going forward, the Cape Winelands Airport, and they're not paying me for the shout out either as well, but the Cape Winelands Airport, and we had the guy, the GM from Lanseria here, you have to consider accessibility. Right, so if you're getting people into those destinations, and Lanseria has been one of those, what do we then, as an industry right now, our future need is going to be about 20,000 square meters of exhibition space without pillars. Where do we put that? And there's an opportunity for a project that says, government give us the land, can private sector fund that? And with that, you can already start securing a automotive show, for instance, as an example.
Yeah.
I mean, there's big tech shows that take place in Silicon Valley that could come, or in Los Angeles that could come to South Africa by 2030, for instance. So we have an opportunity, I think, as an industry, to almost help government understand that by working with us, the supply chains is a very long supply chain.
Yeah.
You know, I was sharing with colleagues, when we talk about transformation, BEE, I go like, it's about money. Forget about all the other things we normally get emotionally about in that regard, because many of us have stayed here, whether we're good or bad around our sustainability, required the towels to be washed. So laundry, for instance, is another aspect that it's not fancy stuff. It's a business opportunity in that regard. So I think we must be, as I said, deliberate what we want to get out of it, and then make it happen.
Thanks, Glenton, and thanks, Otto. I know we are standing between people's stomachs and all that, but I mean, thanks, Chief Iwa and team, for inviting us. I think it was a good session, and at Visa, we always say we want to make sure that you are the best way to pay and be paid.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.